Hi, everyone. Welcome to Joy in Dementia. My name is Laura Smothers-Chu, and I am the CEO and founder of Befriended Heart, where I help daughters navigate their parents' dementia. So today is a very special treat that if you saw in my very first video that I posted on YouTube, and it's a little embarrassing because I was really nervous. I think that my videos have gotten a lot better since then. But I did mention that you needed to get an idea of your parents' finances. That's one of the most important first steps that you need to do once your your one parent is diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment, or if you suspect some early stage dementia. So we're going to talk today about how important it is to get your parents' financials organized. So that way, the next step can be that, your caregiving parent and your forgetful parent, if they're still in the early stage, can meet with a financial planner and you will have all of the information you need at your fingertips. So I have with me today my friend Arvette Reed. And she is the marketing and outreach director at Signature Estate and Investment Advisors here in the DC area. And I promise starting next year, I will have people outside the DC area. That's just where I live. And that's where I've been able to find really good contacts that I wanted to share with you. So Arvette has over 15 years of experience in a variety of elder care spaces, including memory care, independent living, assisted living, nursing care, and hospice. So you can imagine that she has, encountered quite a lot of people with dementia. So she has a unique position in this wealth management firm, and I would translate to be like a financial planning firm for us that aren't in the financial field. And she works with hundreds of families, even in this position, and many of whom are on the dementia journey like us. So Arvette, welcome to Joy in Dementia. It's great to have you here.
Hello, thanks for having me today.
Absolutely. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your expertise?
Sure. So I spent 15 years in the senior housing and healthcare market here in Northern Virginia, always in marketing and admissions, working with families and talking with them, trying to figure out what challenges they had and what might be the best fit for them. And so during that time, I met Tom West, who is the partner in the firm here that I work with at SEIA. And he was always the financial guy that kind of understood that post-retirement healthcare stuff happens. So 2 years ago, he asked me to join the firm, and I'm still the same person I was before, meeting with clients and prospects, talking about the healthcare needs. And then now I'm working with the financial guys to put together a full solution that makes sure we're looking at both pieces when we're talking to clients about help.
So you're basically like the bridge between, using your experience in healthcare and then meeting that with your colleagues in finance.
Right. I call it two tribes, two languages, right? So the healthcare and the finance world, we have to be able to communicate for what's best for our clients and families, right? So I really, really have enjoyed these last couple of years being part of SEIA, but still being the healthcare person.
Awesome. Awesome. And so do you have any personal experience with dementia?
Yeah, so my first memory of having like a family member with dementia was I was in my 20s. I was actually living in California at the time and came back to the DC area for a family reunion and was sitting down with my father's aunt, which is actually my great aunt, where she kept asking me the same question over and over again, like, where do you live? And then 2 minutes later, where do you live? And I just remember like answering her, being confused, but also very calm about it. And then I went to my dad and I'm like, hey, she keeps asking the same question. Dad's like, oh, she has Alzheimer's. So that was the first time I actually connected that word of Alzheimer's to my personal life. And then fast forward years later, I'm actually working in the industry. Always been very comfortable around people going through some kind of dementia diagnosis and working with their families. So that was my first little window into it.
Yeah, wow. And how old were you when you visited your great aunt?
I was in my early 20s.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, that's young.
Yeah.
And so how did that experience with your great aunt and, help shape your career?
Well, what was interesting is when I decided to leave, I was in software at first, actually, for 10 years. And when I left software and went into healthcare, it was just another example of how comfortable I was in that space. I was always comfortable around people's grandparents. I was never uncomfortable visiting people in hospitals. That encounter with my aunt with dementia, I was very calm. So when I decided to enter into the senior housing and healthcare market, I realized it was just a place that I belonged. Is the best way I can put it.
Awesome, awesome. And great. So let's get into the main substance for our long distance daughters. They're like,
Mhm.
how can this help me? Right.
Right,
So
right.
I think we have come up with some really excellent recommendations. And based on your experience in speaking with families all the time that are encountering dementia, and then also from, my personal experience with my dad.
Yeah,
So, what would you say is the very first thing kind of chronologically that's the most important for
right.
long distance daughters to take care of their parents?
I think as soon as you start to realize that there's some kind of mild cognitive impairment, whether it's officially diagnosed or not, I mean, as daughters, our senses go up, like something's just off, right?
Yes.
And so one of the things I would suggest you do early on is the person that has whatever form of dementia is the forgetful parent. Try to make sure that you don't lose access to passwords and things like that. I mean, that is huge because if the person who has the diagnosis was the one managing all the finances, and then all of a sudden they can't remember how to get into anything, then everybody's kind of lost, right?
Right.
So you have to figure out early on how to get access to passwords for email, for any online accounts, and document them so that you can have access to that information when you need it.
Definitely. That is exactly the first thing that my family and I did when we noticed that, when my dad was first diagnosed with MCI. And luckily, he was able to tell us, since he was in the early stages, what his password was for his email.
Right.
Unfortunately, he did not recall, his passwords for all of his financial accounts and things like that. But what, kind of the great thing now about technology is that you can reset your password. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's what I ended up doing to get access to my dad's, bank accounts, his investment accounts. And so reset the password, had it sent back to his email, and then I made sure that my mom knew the password, and we didn't put it on a little post-it note that could get lost. I think my mom typed it out and it was on a sheet. So we had a sheet of passwords in a binder. So in case we ever needed to, access his information, which of course you definitely need to do, right? If you're trying to get an
Right.
idea of your parents' finances. We did that. And I think, Arvette, you brought up a really good point about phones, like smartphone
Yes.
passwords.
Yes.
So,
Because phones are so difficult to get in these days. And
yeah,
if you don't know the password, you're not getting in. I mean, no one's going to help you get in.
right.
So it's really important to try to get that information, and you have to do it in a way that's sensitive because you don't want the forgetful parent to feel like you're taking away their responsibilities or you're
Totally.
taking control. So it has to be in a safe way that says we're going to make sure that we all can get to the information when we need it. You're still going to be responsible, mom or dad, for it, but just in case, we're going to have a backup plan.
Yeah, that's perfect. And then we also talked about the long distance, daughter can maybe plant the seed for the caregiving parent to start to think about what might happen in the future, right? Like what they
Right.
might need money for, what they might need to pay for. And I thought, since you have so much experience speaking with families about this type of thing, like, is there a good worded question that, the long distance daughter could say that wouldn't bring a lot of fear into the mind of the caregiving parent or denial?
Right. So it's really interesting is all the families that I've dealt with, and actually, in my own family, we're having some of these conversations as well, is how do you bring up the topic of realistic options down the road because we do know that people who are diagnosed with some kind of dementia, it is a progressive disease and things are going to change. And there's this timing, right? When do you talk about it? When don't you talk about it? And the caregiving spouse, they're just overwhelmed with the day to day. So they're not going to think a week from now, a month from now, a year from now. They're just trying to get through the next 3 hours, right?
Totally.
Or get
Yeah.
through the night. So as someone, as the daughter who wants to help, maybe one of the things you can do is a little bit by little bit start asking the information like, hey, we're all in this together, right? And we know that things are going to change. We might need to start thinking about what life's going to be like in a year, like, and do it without any shame. Do it without like you're not making a decision. You're just throwing out all the options.
Right.
Because sometimes people don't think there are other options. Like, for instance, a couple that's been married for 50 years, the idea of not being together, like, isn't even in front of them. They don't even want to think that way. But those of us who have been in this industry for a long time know that it is very likely that at some point they won't be together. So how do you start having that conversation in a safe way that's not thrown in their face, and can be proactive? And usually the daughter is the one that can do it, honestly. We've all of us have been in situations with our parents where we're the ones bringing up sticky conversations.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And, by watching my channel, Joy in Dementia, you also, as a long distance daughter, kind of know what's coming down the pike,
Right.
And so I think one of the challenges with that, like for families that, don't have the knowledge of what's coming in the future, they'll kind of be like, well, I don't know what to expect,
Right.
but you as a long distance daughter do. So there's a lot of value in, you're having that knowledge for your caregiving parent and to kind of share that, but not, sharing it in a sensitive way, right? Like Arvette.
Well, and opening the conversation up. We had a client whose family really wanted mom and dad to leave the house and move to a big community. But when you talk to the caregiving spouse, she really didn't want to leave her home, not because she was hunkering down, but she knew that when her husband was farther along in the dementia journey, if he wasn't there, she still wanted to be there. She wasn't ready for the rest of her life to move. And so it was really important for her to have a voice in that, right?
Yes.
So when you're asking the questions, you're not necessarily giving them the answers.
Yeah. I mean, these are really great recommendations. And then, what is a good way kind of to get all the finances in order? And how do we know what we need to keep track of and organize?
Right. So remember 15 years as the marketing and missions person working with families, and I never really asked them about the money side. I just basically said, like, these are your options and this is your cost. But now that I'm on this side of the fence, I really see how important it is to work with families early to explain to them how to get organized. And one of the hardest things to do is get your hand around and your arms around all the different details when it comes to finances. It's not just your stocks and bonds and your investments, but it's your mortgage, it's all your bank statements, it's all your expenses, it's your life insurance policy, it's all of those things. So one of the things that would be really helpful to the caregiving spouse, right? Once again, they're just trying to get through the day. So the idea of going through the stack of mail that might have been piled up in one of the rooms is not top on their list. As an adult daughter, that's one thing you can do. You can go through the piles of paper and organize them and start cataloging the different institutions that statements are coming in from the mail. If you watch mail for a quarter, you're most likely going to get almost everything, right? Mm-hmm. Most things are either going to come in a month or at a quarter. There are some things that obviously come at the year, but mostly month and a quarter. And you'll have the ability to gather that information and start logging what all the different pieces are. And that's the organizing piece.
Yeah. And so Arvette, when does the life insurance, statement come? Like, how often is that one?
I think you usually have to search for your policy and review your policy on that one. So that wouldn't be something that would be like a statement in the mail. But what's really important is it's having a true overall picture of all the different pieces of the puzzle, because you can't ever really make a decision without understanding all the pieces, right? And this is something you can do in a day. You could do it over time. I like to say that when people are going through this journey, remember I worked in hospice for 5 years too, and there's a whole grief right around hospice. There's also a huge grief around those who have a loved one with dementia.
Mhm.
So some days you may not want to dig in papers. Another day you may. Whatever, wherever you are in your process, when you feel the need, like it's time for me to do something, that is just one option of something you can do that's really going to help the caregiving parent.
Yeah, and I love that idea. And in talking with you about this earlier, it really made me feel like, I should have been there to help my mom organize the papers. Because sort of the paperwork that we have, in our 30s or 40s, is not
Right.
nearly as much as what
No.
you have later. And so I kind of
Yes.
thought like, oh well, mom can handle the paperwork. It's just a couple forms, but it's totally not. And so
No. No.
so that's what I want to. That's what Arvette and I want to pass on to you. As long distance daughter, that if you can really support your caregiving parent going through those papers, because it's not just the tangible papers. There's so much emotion around it, and grief,
Right.
as Arvette said, and so it's helpful to have someone there with you. And actually, when my mom did end up having a friend, just be there, kind of the presence was important.
Right.
For her. And so I'm really grateful for that. And then I think there's also sort of the responsibility and the vulnerability too that our caregiving parent feel. And can you talk a little bit more about that, Arvette?
Yeah. So you can imagine, and it doesn't matter if it was your mom or your dad who was actually the numbers person, right? Whoever kept the numbers. Whoever kept the numbers, if they're the one that is now the forgetful parent, the other parent, the caregiving parent, has some guilt about taking over that role and responsibility, right? Where their loved one did that forever. So part of it is, I don't want to take away something that they enjoyed and they always did. The other part of it is the vulnerable, I don't really know what I'm looking at. And so, am I going to really do this correctly? And so, having a daughter or somebody say, it doesn't really matter that you don't know anything, it just helps to organize. Because
Right.
when you organize, then it allows you to figure things out. Right? But
Right. Right.
if if the if the bills and the statements have been coming for 6 months and nobody's going through them and they're just piled up in the corner, I mean that's overwhelming visually. So
Yeah.
any little thing you can do to organize stacks of paper, very, very helpful.
Yeah. And I think, sort of when we're managing our stress in day to day life, I know that if, I like to
Yeah.
clean a room in my house, and it helps me
Uh-huh.
feel like I have a little bit of control over things. So
Right.
I think that would also be helpful for the caregiving parent too. And you had a great idea too, Arvette, where, if the long distance daughter can't, be there, if they're like very long distance,
Right.
the caregiving parent can actually just start collecting, like not even anything specific or filing or anything like that, but just
Yep.
throwing the statement in a basket or something.
Yep.
So that way it's consolidated and they kind of, the caregiving parent feels like they have something final and throw it in the basket and I'm done with that.
Yes. Any
Yeah.
little piece of mail that comes in like that, just throw it in one place. So the next time the daughter's in town or, they can go through it.
I love that. And when Arvette was telling me this earlier, I was like, oh, we should have done that as a family because also, because you kind of forget, like, who did I get the attorney in fact form from? And if you just do them all
Right.
at the same time, then they're all coming to you at the same time. And it's less for your caregiving parent to keep track of as well. Yeah. And so I would say, so far, just to summarize, so the first thing we talked about was try to get your forgetful parents' passwords as soon as possible and do it,
Right.
ask for it in a sensitive way and kind of just in case, it would be really great for me to have this and, caregiving parent as well. The second thing we talked about
Right.
was it'd be really great for you as a long distance daughter to kind of plant the seed. What was the question that would be good to ask Arvette?
I would say something like, we know we're on this together, right? And so I think it's important for us to figure out as a family what this looks like in a year, in 6 months, in a year, in 2 years, in 5 years, right? We
Right.
don't want the caregiving spouse to feel like they're taking this on all themselves. And so you just want to talk about options. We need to think about all the options on the table as the forgetful parents disease continues to progress.
Right.
And you'll be amazed sometimes what people are thinking If you just ask the question, they might spit out an answer, right?
Yeah, that's so true. And it's also good because you're in a way, validating your caregiving parents' feelings, even
Right.
acknowledging like, hey, I know you're thinking about this and that's okay. Like we're both thinking
That's
about
okay.
it.
Yes, because they might not bring it up to you in fear that you're going to react in a way and get upset, right?
Right.
So by
Right.
you bringing up the subject, it allows them to open up to whatever thoughts they have and their fears, obviously, as well.
Yes. Awesome. And then the third thing we talked about was helping your caregiving parent organize the paperwork. And so, like we said, if there's a lot of distance between you and your caregiving parent,
Hmm.
that maybe your caregiving parent can put the mail aside in a basket or something and kind of just out of sight, out of mind type thing. And so
Yep.
you don't need to organize anything, and you can just do that when you visit them. And then the last recommendation is reading all the documents. So we're talking like
Right.
the insurance policy document, bank
The legal
documents, legal
documents,
documents. Yeah,
like your trust, your will, your advance directives. And so, as the adult daughter who might not live there, you can take the time to read through all of these documents and just make notes of things. Then you can figure out what the next step is after.
right, right. And so what our vet and I are kind of referring to is with insurance, it's like beneficiary, and those types of things. So wherever you see your forgetful parent's name, that should kind of, put up a flag for you that, that's going to need to get changed. And so,
Especially if it's something they're going to have to sign,
okay.
right? If there's something, if in order for something to be started, enacted, it requires a signature from the forgetful parent. That's your aha that the language might have to be changed or adjusted, or there might need to be a new form like the attorney in fact form or something like that.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit more about the attorney in fact form? Right.
Most institutions have their own forms, typically called an attorney in fact form. And
Mhm.
what it does is it will simplify the process of getting information about that account if you get it on their form, as opposed to showing up with a power of attorney legal document, which means that document now has to go to the financial institution's legal. So you're actually not going to be able to get anything done in short order. So it's good to be proactive and get these attorney in fact forms completed for each of your financial organizations. So as a long distance daughter, once you have a list of all the financial organizations, you could easily call them and say, could you please send an attorney in fact form to the address of record, right? Put the request, they'll send the form. That way they're all there for the caregiving spouse to fill out, get notarized. And it's one more step. It's going to make things simpler down the line.
Yes. And that's a really good role for the long distance caregiving daughter to do because you don't need a POA in order to call the institutions and ask for that form.
Right. As long as you ask for the form to be mailed to the address on record, it should be fine.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. These are really, really great recommendations. And I wish I used a couple of them myself with my family, but I think, hindsight is 2020. And that's why we're sharing this information with you, our viewers. So you can learn from my mistakes. And so, Arvette, what would you say to our long distance daughters who say, these are great recommendations, but I just have no time?
Right. Right. I would say the reality is you do what you can do when you can do it. And you're going to have your ups and down moments, just like the caregiving spouse, right? Just because you're not there doesn't mean you're not having your own emotions of having to deal with it. What I would encourage you though is when you do feel like you're ready to engage with the caregiving parent, make sure you're being supportive and you're not actually being the one giving direction or making decisions. When I meet with families today in the financial world, I still utilize a lot of the questioning techniques that I did when I was in senior housing and healthcare and trying to pull out what is it that the caregiving spouse really wants, not what the daughter thinks her parent needs, right? And remember, I am a daughter. I've been in the same circumstance. My parents didn't have dementia, but same conversation, right? So just remember that you're there to support and that your caregiving parent is the one that actually has to really make the decision, right?
Mhm.
And I would think that's a tip I just want us all to try to remember.
Yeah. And something too we talked about was that these 4 steps could be done in like a weekend visit, you know?
Right.
So it could be done if you live, in another country, but you visit your parents for Thanksgiving, you could just stay a couple more days and do that over the weekend.
Yes.
Obviously try to be there for a weekday, just at least one weekday, so you can get in contact with like the financial institutions and things like that to ask them to
Yes.
send the attorney in fact form. But otherwise, this organization, it really, could be just a couple days and you can get so much done.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Arvette. And just the last thing is, if you wanted daughters to get one thing out of this really great video, what would that one point be?
You have to acknowledge that you are part of this. You have to be honest with yourself about your own ups and downs, as well as being supportive of the caregiving parent and digesting what's happening to your forgetful parent. So you still have to be nice to yourself, is the best way I can say it. Because we all want to jump in and solve. And sometimes when we feel like we're not doing enough, we beat ourselves up. But any little thing you can do is helpful. It doesn't have to be grand in scale. It could be one step at a time when you're ready to do it.
Yes, I love that. And I will also add too that, like, especially with the passwords thing and
Yes.
needing to like get the documents, the attorney in fact form, like those are probably the most important thing. And if you can do that in the early stages of dementia, I would try to do those first. So Arvette, thank you so much for joining me today. So where can we find you?
So the best place to get information about us is affordlifecare.com. So we are with SEIA, but within SEIA, this piece of focusing on clients and families that are going through healthcare stuff in the dementia journey, you really would find more information on affordlifecare.com. We have articles, case studies, we have a podcast. So there's all kind of fun stuff on that website.
Awesome. And what's your podcast called, Arvette?
It's called Life Care Affordability Planning.
Awesome. Awesome. And you just started that, right?
Right. Yeah. So all of this is brand new online. We've been doing this work for years, but we finally have a decent online presence. So we're really excited about that.
Yay, exciting. Awesome. Well, I will put Arvette's information in the description below. And I wanted to thank you all so much for joining me today. And Arvette, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I hope that these tips have been helpful, especially when getting your parents' finances in order, so then you can have a seamless conversation with your financial planner moving forward. So I will see you next time. Bye.